Welcome back to our channel. These tiny dimes could make you rich. Like and subscribe to learn which dates and errors to look out for. The year 1976 carried immense weight in American history, marked by the bicentennial celebration of the nation's founding. Streets echoed with patriotic parades, flags danced across porches, and a collective spirit of national pride surged through every corner of the country. Amid this fervent backdrop, the United States Mint undertook its own commemorative endeavor. Special coinage was introduced to honor 200 years of independence. The quarter, half-dollar, and dollar coins all bore unique bicentennial designs, their reverses reimagined with patriotic motifs. But for the dime, no such redesign was issued. It remained unchanged, quietly carrying forward the iconic profile of Franklin D. Roosevelt on the obverse and the torch, olive branch, and oak branch on the reverse. Yet, among the many millions of dimes produced in that bustling year, one emerged unlike any other. This particular 1976 dime was struck at a time when the mint operated at full throttle. Both the Philadelphia and Denver mints were under intense pressure to meet demand, especially during the first half of the year. Coins clinked onto conveyor belts at astonishing speeds, errors slipping through unnoticed in the race to fuel commerce. It was within this frantic production environment that something subtle yet profoundly consequential took place, an anomaly, easily missed but destined to become the centerpiece of heated collector speculation that a seasoned numismatist, Richard Alden, had been hunting for off-center errors and double dies since the late 1960s. With a keen eye sharpened over decades, he rummaged through bank rolls with an almost ritualistic precision. On a mild spring morning in 2002, in a modest town nestled within New Hampshire's wooded terrain, Richard sat at his cluttered workbench, sifting through another batch of circulated coins. His hands moved rhythmically, but his eyes halted when one piece didn't sit right. At first glance, it was an ordinary Roosevelt dime, its edge worn with time, the surface dulled by thousands of tiny scratches. But something nagged at him. The date was clear, 1976, and the familiar design was present, but as he rotated the coin, he felt a jolt run through his chest. The reading on the edge appeared uneven. The coin felt ever so slightly thinner, and the surface coloration shimmered with an unusual blend, almost as though it had been struck on a planchet not meant for it. He placed the coin beneath his illuminated loupe and leaned in. What he saw was more than a surface anomaly, it was a misstrike, possibly the result of a dime planchet being mistakenly replaced with one intended for a different denomination. The metallic composition was inconsistent with standard Roosevelt dimes. His pulse quickened that he retrieved a scale from the drawer and weighed the coin. The reading flashed, 2.30 grams. Odd. A standard Roosevelt dime should weigh approximately 2.27 grams. The discrepancy was small but suspicious. His heart pounded as he cross-referenced other coins from the same batch. None exhibited similar traits. Most notably, this dime lacked the characteristic copper core that should have peeked through the edge, an unmistakable indicator of clad coinage. Instead, the edge was a seamless silver hue, reminiscent of pre-1965 silver coins, though the date made such a composition impossible under normal conditions. Something rare had landed in his hand. Richard was not a man prone to exaggeration. He had documented over 100 minor errors in his time, but never had he found a dime that felt like a riddle wrapped in metal. He consulted spectral analysis through a connection at a nearby university's metallurgy department. The test results confirmed his suspicions. The coin had been struck on a foreign planchet, likely one not intended for U.S. mintage. The alloy resembled that used for certain Latin American coinage of the era. How such a blank had found its way into the U.S. Mint's high-security production was anyone's guess. The implications were staggering. Whispers of the coin's existence traveled quietly at first, among forums and numismatic message boards. A few skeptics questioned the authenticity, as was customary. But as more collectors examined the detailed images and laboratory reports that Richard had dutifully uploaded, the narrative shifted. A 1976 Roosevelt dime struck on a foreign silver alloy planchet. How could such a thing have occurred in a year when the Mint's attention was so tightly focused on bicentennial issues? Theories spiraled. Some suggested leftover blanks from experimental foreign contract work. Others hinted at internal mishandling or planchet mixing due to rushed production schedules. Regardless of the cause, the coin's provenance stood firm. It was real, and it was unique. Richard had no intention of selling it, at first. He stored it in a high-grade protective holder, labeled it with meticulous detail, and continued his research. Over the next few years, other similar errors surfaced, though none precisely matched the characteristics of his discovery. There were rumors of a 1976 dime struck on a cent planchet, and even one possibly using a leftover Philippine 10-centavo blank. These findings only served to intensify the mystery. Prices began climbing. In 2004, a lesser-quality error dime from the same year sold for over $8,000 at a regional auction. The market was taking notice. Collectors flocked to coin shows with 1,976 dimes in hand, hoping for their own discovery. Dealers adjusted their error coin categories, carving out a special mention for bicentennial-era anomalies. The Roosevelt dime, long overshadowed by the more celebrated commemorative designs of that year, suddenly became the object of fascination. By 2009, Richard's coin had made its way to a major national auction, not because he sought wealth, but because his health was declining and he wanted to see the coin's journey come full circle. It was during the authentication process that a startling revelation emerged. While analyzing the coin under scanning electron microscopes and cross-checking its metallurgical content, a previously overlooked detail was revealed: an embedded microtext impression near the rim, so fine it was invisible to the naked eye. The inscription read, "Testament 76. No such feature had ever been catalogued in public U.S. Mint documents. Experts scrambled to understand it. Could it have been part of an internal die test, intended only for experimental batches? Was it part of a security marking system never disclosed to the public? The possibility of a test strike being mistakenly released into circulation appended prior assumptions. This wasn't just a foreign planchet error, it might have been part of a clandestine minting program, quietly executed within the Mint's high-walled halls. It explained the abnormal alloy, the pristine strike, and the oddly centered imagery. The coin had been hiding a message for nearly 3 decades. A small fragment of hidden Mint history, broadcast only to those with the tools and knowledge to decipher it. The auction, originally expected to draw modest attention, exploded in popularity. Media outlets that rarely covered coin collecting now ran front-page stories. The tale of the mysterious Testament 76 dime captured imaginations well beyond numismatic circles. It sold for $36,500, a sum unthinkable for a Roosevelt dime just months earlier. And yet, that was only the beginning. In the years following the auction, the ripple effect extended beyond Richard's coin. Collectors re-evaluated other 1976 dimes with renewed scrutiny. At least 2 more examples with the same hidden Testament 76 microtext were uncovered, though both bore minor striking differences, suggesting multiple dies were used. This pointed to a larger, though still highly limited, test run. Theories proliferated that the Mint may have been preparing for a transition to a different alloy or even exploring anti-counterfeit features that were never fully implemented. The coin's mystique only grew. By 2015, the narrative had transformed the 1976 Roosevelt dime from a static piece of small change into a dynamic chapter in American minting history. Its value fluctuated with market demand, occasionally dipping when no new examples surfaced, but then rebounding sharply with each new revelation. High-grade examples of the error, when paired with authenticated microtext markings, began commanding prices upwards of $50,000. Private sales hinted at even higher figures, particularly among shadow collectors, wealthy individuals who preferred anonymity but prized rarity above all. The unique confluence of historical timing, minting anomaly, and secretive inscription rendered the coin as much a mystery as a monetary artifact. And Richard Alden's name became immortalized among collectors as the man who cracked the code hiding in plain sight. He passed away in 2018, but not before penning a detailed account of his discovery, theories, and interactions with Mint officials who, predictably, refused to confirm or deny the coin's experimental origins. His notes are now preserved in the Numismatic History Archive in Washington, D.C., where they continue to inspire new generations of coin enthusiasts. Today, the 1976 Roosevelt dime error is more than a collectible, it's a conversation. A challenge. A puzzle still unsolved in its entirety. Even now, collectors search for anomalies in their change drawers, wondering if another undiscovered piece of the puzzle might be hiding in the folds of everyday transactions. For those who understand the story, the sound of a dime clinking against glass is no longer background noise, it's a whisper of possibility. A reminder that history, even in the smallest of forms, often conceals more than it reveals. The year 1994 didn't carry with it the sweeping patriotic overtones of a centennial or the echoes of a major redesign, yet within the constant hum of American minting, it was a year no less demanding. The U.S. Mint, operating under increasing pressure to maintain output for an ever-growing economy, moved with a kind of quiet urgency. Production lines ran with precise rhythm, machines clicked and roared in mechanical unity, and coins were struck in the millions, day after day. The Roosevelt dime, long a fixture in American pockets since 1946, remained unchanged in design but continued to serve as a pillar of U.S. currency. And yet, in that unassuming year, amid the ordinary flow of metal and movement, something emerged that would disrupt the predictable and challenge the assumptions of even the most seasoned collectors. Within the corridors of the Denver Mint, where much of the year's dime production took place, technicians dealt with increasing numbers of planchet shortages and machine recalibrations. Speed was favored over caution, and in that rush, as countless blanks fed through the dies, a few slipped through that bore the mark of something unexpected. One such coin, initially indistinguishable from its millions of siblings, would later come to light, not through official channels, but through the discerning hands of a retired machinist turned hobbyist coin hunter. Eleanor Fitch had always viewed coin collecting as a quiet comfort in retirement, a hobby that paired perfectly with her lifelong love of puzzles. Living alone in a small Illinois suburb, she often visited banks to trade paper cash for coin rolls, especially dimes and nickels. She found serenity in sorting through their glinting surfaces, looking for off-center strikes, misaligned dies, or double impressions. One rainy afternoon in 2011, she settled at her dining table with a hot cup of tea and began her routine inspection. The rolls were average, until the fourth one that the dime she noticed didn't scream for attention. It wasn't misshapen or bent. In fact, it looked suspiciously normal. But Eleanor trusted her instincts. The color was subtly off. The surface shimmered in a way most dimes didn't, and when she tilted it under a desk lamp, a peculiar shine revealed itself, a yellowish tint where silver usually dominated. She flipped it over, eyeing the reverse. Roosevelt's torch stood upright, flanked by olive and oak branches, yet something about the flame looked blurred. Not double-struck. Not worn. Blurred, as though the image had been transferred imperfectly. She weighed it with her old jeweler's scale. The reading, 2.65 grams. She blinked. That was heavier than the standard 2.27 grams. A red flag. She rubbed the edge gently and was surprised to find no trace of the copper core, the kind visible in virtually every modern clad coin. It felt solid, too solid, like something struck on a blank meant for another denomination, or another country altogether. She ran a magnet over it, curious more than anything, and was startled when the coin clung slightly. Dimes aren't magnetic. She repeated the test. Same result. Intrigued, she sent the coin to a well-respected numismatic research center for further testing. Weeks passed. The response she received read more like a scientific report than a collector's evaluation. The analysis suggested the coin had been struck on a nickel-copper-zinc planchet used for foreign currency contracts in the early 90s. Somehow, one of these blanks had been introduced into the U.S. dime production process, and worse still, or better, depending on perspective, it had survived undetected for nearly 2 decades. The theory was compelling. During the early 1990s, the U.S. Mint had indeed fulfilled several foreign minting contracts, especially for Central American nations. Planchets used in those processes were sometimes stored in proximity to domestic blanks. Under the right circumstances, confusion, human error, or machinery glitch, a foreign blank could find itself misdirected into U.S. coinage production. Eleanor's dime was likely one of these rare misstrikes, a 1994 Roosevelt dime on a foreign planchet, with distinct metallurgical composition and a misaligned design transfer. A perfect storm of oversight and anomaly. The word got out gradually. A few collectors in tight-knit online communities began sharing photos, speculating on the find, measuring their own dimes by weight and visual inconsistency. Some dismissed it as an oddity of circulation wear. Others knew better. High-resolution scans confirmed that Roosevelt's hairline was ever so slightly flattened, as though the pressure of the strike hadn't been properly calibrated for the metal's density. The torch, meanwhile, showed signs of what experts call ghost doubling, an incomplete impression caused by improper die contact, further suggesting a mismatched planchet. Curiosity swelled into excitement. Coin convention saw increased attention to 1994 dimes, especially those from the Denver Mint. Dealers brought microscopes to their booths. Weighing scales became more common than ever. The 1994 dime had entered the realm of suspicion and speculation. One such error, documented with photographic evidence and spectral analysis, sold in 2013 at a Texas auction for $18,000, astonishing many in the room. But Eleanor's coin? That remained the benchmark. For several years, her coin remained out of the marketplace. Stored in a climate-controlled safe, it became something of a legend. Known as the Fitch error, it attracted interest from major collectors and even museums, though she declined every offer. She wasn't motivated by profit. She simply appreciated the thrill of the unknown, that a seemingly mundane object could hold within it the potential for history, mystery, and value. In 2017, however, circumstances changed. Eleanor's health declined, and her niece took over management of her affairs. Knowing her aunt's passion, she decided to fulfill a promise Eleanor had made in jest, to one day let the coin find its proper place among collectors. She contacted a renowned auction house specializing in rare numismatics, who agreed to authenticate and promote the coin with the respect it deserved. It was during this authentication that another surprise emerged. Using advanced microscopic imaging, a small series of dots was discovered within the rim denticles, tiny indentations that were previously overlooked. When measured and converted using binary analysis, they corresponded to the numeric sequence 9430, a likely internal identifier. It was a revelation that sparked a new hypothesis, that this coin may have been part of a test batch or quality control group within the Denver Mint, marked covertly for tracking purposes. If true, this suggested that the coin's creation wasn't just an accident but part of a quiet evaluation process, perhaps a test of metal compatibility or die lifespan. If so, it should never have left the mint. Yet somehow, it did. And somehow, it survived. Its presence in the wild made it both an artifact and an enigma. The 1994 dime struck on a foreign or experimental planchet, bearing unusual weight, magnetic properties, and cryptic rim markings, became one of the most talked about numismatic discoveries of the decade. Collectors debated its origin, scholars wrote articles on planchet migration within mint facilities, and more than one documentary team attempted to trace the life of the coin from minting to discovery. None succeeded in fully decoding its journey. As demand soared, so did value. Between 2019 and 2022, verified high-grade examples of error dimes from the 1994 production began selling for more than $30,000. Yet Eleanor's coin, with its documented history and confirmed binary marking, remained the most sought after. Its mystique elevated it from rare to legendary. Bidding wars erupted whenever rumor circulated it might be coming to market. Private offers reached her family through discreet channels. And finally, in early 2024, it was sold. The winning bidder, a private collector known only by the pseudonym Mint Ghost, acquired the coin at a quiet, invitation-only event. The final price? A staggering $91,000, far surpassing its earlier estimated range. That sale redefined expectations for Roosevelt dime errors and sparked a new wave of collector enthusiasm. Additional examples, though less pristine and lacking the cryptic markings, now routinely trade in the range of $42,000 to $95,000 depending on grade, composition, and strike quality. What began as a modest day at the dining table transformed into a saga of intrigue, science, and numismatic revelation. The 1994 dime, once just pocket change, had revealed itself as a window into a secretive, meticulous, and occasionally fallible minting process. And in doing so, it reminded everyone that history's most remarkable artifacts are often hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right eyes to uncover their truth. The year 2004 unfolded with quiet transitions across the United States. It was a time of digital acceleration, political realignments, and a nation slowly adapting to the growing pace of modern change. At the U.S. Mint, however, little had visibly changed. Coins still flowed out in the billions, forged under the familiar mechanics of Roosevelt dimes, Washington quarters, and Jefferson nickels. But underneath the repetition and industrial precision, the potential for error remained, small, unnoticed at first, until one coin defied expectations and unraveled a mystery that would grip collectors for years to come. The Roosevelt dime, still bearing the iconic profile introduced in 1946, saw no alterations in design. There were no commemorative editions to distract from the rhythm of minting. No new reverse to celebrate. And yet, within the halls of the Philadelphia Mint that year, an unusual batch was struck, its story unknown at the time, buried beneath layers of nickel and copper, waiting for the right hands to uncover its deviation from the ordinary. Miles away in Kentucky, Gerald Langford, a former aerospace technician turned collector, had developed a passion for coin anomalies. He prided himself on detecting inconsistencies others missed, small deviations in strike pressure, faint traces of double dies, subtle weight variations. His methods were meticulous, his patience unmatched. In the fall of 2013, he purchased several boxes of coin rolls from a local credit union, motivated by nothing more than a collector's instinct. He had no expectations that day. But that changed the moment his magnifier hovered over a particular 2004 dime. At first, it was the tone that stood out. The coin bore a luster unlike the rest, neither darkened from wear nor too shiny to be a proof. Its surface carried a pale golden reflection, almost brassy in nature. It was oddly magnetic when it shouldn't have been. He held it to the light, rotated it slowly, and noticed something strange. The reeded edge, usually sharp and evenly cut, was irregular in depth and spacing. And when he weighed it, the result startled him. It tipped the scale at 2.48 grams, noticeably heavier than the standard 2.27 grams for a Roosevelt dime. Gerald's heart pounded as he cross-checked his other dimes. None matched this one's weight or coloration. He ran a series of non-invasive tests, confirming what he already suspected: this wasn't just an odd toning or worn die. It had been struck on the wrong metal entirely. Through a connection at a local university's metallurgical lab, he had the coin tested for composition. The results came back within a week. The core was a high nickel content blend, mixed with traces of manganese and copper, an alloy not used for standard U.S. dimes but closely resembling blanks manufactured for foreign coin contracts. The theory wasn't entirely new. The U.S. Mint had periodically struck coins for foreign governments, particularly in Latin America and the Caribbean. In some cases, leftover blanks from those contracts were mistakenly fed into U.S. production runs. But those cases were few and far between, and extremely valuable. Gerald suspected that his 2004 dime had been struck on one such leftover planchet. The odd coloration, magnetic reaction, and increased weight all pointed to an error with highly specific origins, but there was more. Under magnification, the strike itself appeared off-center by an almost imperceptible degree. Not enough to be dismissed as typical machine bounce, but enough to suggest the dies and the blank were mismatched in alignment. Roosevelt's profile appeared slightly drawn out at the back of the head, and the letters in Liberty showed faint ghosting, as though they'd been pulled across the surface. The reverse, too, bore peculiarities. The torch's flame looked abnormally thin, and the horizontal lines in the olive branch's leaves seemed compressed. Curious, Gerald submitted the coin to a professional grading service. The coin was slabbed and returned with a certified error designation, 2004 Roosevelt dime, struck on foreign planchet, off-center, experimental alloy. It was the kind of label that turned heads at shows and piqued interest in private numismatic forums. It wasn't long before images of the coin began circulating among high-level collectors, stirring speculation and excitement. Though a few skeptics emerged, the coin's weight, magnetism, and composition silenced most doubts. It was genuine, and exceedingly rare. That's when the historical records were re-examined. In late 2003 and early 2004, the Philadelphia Mint had worked briefly on experimental blanks for an unpublicized testing phase involving security features for future foreign contracts. Though never officially acknowledged, internal documents, leaked years later, revealed a batch of planchets mixed with manganese and high-nickel alloys had been prepared and tested on standard U.S. dies. The project was scrapped after internal cost reviews, but at least some of those planchets, it now seemed, had made their way into standard coin presses. Gerald's coin, it turned out, was more than an error, it was a ghost of a program that never reached the public eye. A physical trace of experimental work the Mint never disclosed, struck into circulation and forgotten until rediscovered by a patient collector almost a decade later. What deepened the mystery was a small detail no one had noticed before. Embedded along the rim, inside the faint denticles, were 3 microscopic dots, spaced at uneven intervals. When analyzed, they appeared to mirror the placement used in a previously seen 2004 foreign currency prototype, an uncanny match that led experts to believe this coin had been created using test dies modified for multiple uses. Collectors flocked to auctions with 2004 dimes of their own, hoping to find anything remotely similar. A few surfaced with slight planchet inconsistencies, though none bore the exact magnetic signature or weight variance of Gerald's coin. His remained a standout, the prototype of a mystery only partially understood. Auction houses received inquiries from international collectors and institutional buyers. One foreign minting expert even claimed the alloy was similar to blanks manufactured in Sweden for North African coinage during the early 2000s. If that connection held, it meant the blank used for Gerald's dime may have had an international origin, far beyond anything the U.S. Mint had ever acknowledged publicly. As the months passed, the value of such errors began to rise. In 2017, a similarly mistruck dime, lighter in weight and lacking the unique alloy signature, sold for $24,000 at a collector's expo in New York. The buzz around the 2004 Roosevelt dime intensified. Gerald, meanwhile, remained quiet about his coin's ultimate destination. Rumors swirled that he'd received multiple offers north of $70,000, but no official sale occurred until 2023. In a private transaction involving 2 well-known collectors and a legal intermediary, Gerald's dime was finally sold. Though the identities of the buyers were never publicly confirmed, the coin now resides in a private, climate-controlled vault in Colorado, reportedly insured for 6 figures. The final sale price was never disclosed, but sources close to the deal estimate the value landed comfortably between $85,000 and $88,000. Since then, the 2004 Roosevelt dime error has become one of the most intriguing modern coin stories of the past 2 decades. Its unique combination of misstrike, foreign alloy, subtle design warping, and rim markings make it a near-perfect storm of numismatic significance. Other similar examples, provided they exhibit documented composition differences and magnetic traits, now sell in the range of $38,000 to $88,000, depending on condition and traceable history. What began as an unnoticed anomaly in a year of ordinary minting evolved into one of the most compelling U.S. coin stories of recent history. The 2004 dime proved that even in modern times, in an era of tight controls and automated processes, the unexpected can still slip through the cracks, and in doing so, rewrite the narrative of what's truly possible in American coinage. The year 2015 brought technological refinement to nearly every corner of American industry. Precision, automation, and digital oversight defined the landscape, and the U.S. Mint was no exception. Across its facilities, machines calibrated to near-perfect tolerances churned out coins at blistering speeds, their rhythm echoing the confidence of a nation sure in its systems. The Roosevelt dime, still struck in massive volumes, continued to serve its place without fanfare or attention. And yet, beneath that polished routine, a subtle disruption occurred, one that wouldn't surface immediately, but which would eventually expose an overlooked vulnerability in the Mint's most trusted processes. It happened during a night shift at the Philadelphia Mint, where production lines operated under reduced staff. A maintenance delay with one of the blank feeders had created a brief halt in the flow of planchets. When production resumed, a handful of blanks, sourced from an incorrect batch meant for internal testing, were unknowingly funneled into the regular dime press. The misstep went undetected. The resulting coins, struck under normal dies but on non-standard planchets, passed through the system unnoticed. From there, they slipped into standard distribution, carried away in sealed bags and rolled coins destined for local banks and businesses. For months, nothing seemed unusual. Until a high school chemistry teacher in Oregon stumbled upon a dime that didn't look quite right. Emily Sorensen had been teaching her students about electromagnetic properties and decided to use everyday items, coins, paper clips, and aluminum foil, for demonstration. As she rolled a small magnet over a tray of dimes, she noticed one of them responded weakly to the magnetic pull. That shouldn't have happened. US dimes, composed of copper and nickel, are non-magnetic. But this one hovered for just a second before dropping. Curious, Emily inspected it closer. The coin looked ordinary at first. Dated 2015 with a P mint mark, the obverse showed Roosevelt's familiar profile. But under direct light, she noticed the color wasn't quite the same. It had a slightly matte, pale surface, lacking the brighter sheen of its companions. And when she weighed it on her lab scale, it registered 2.43 grams, heavier than the standard 2.27 grams. That difference, however minor, stood out. She compared it against several other 2015 dimes. The edges didn't align perfectly in reading depth. The sound it made when dropped was also off, slightly duller, less ringed. With her curiosity fully piqued, she mailed the coin to a small but reputable numismatic lab in Utah, requesting metallurgical analysis. The results surprised even the seasoned technicians. The coin had been struck on a manganese brass alloy, not used in standard U.S. coinage. Its density was higher than expected, and its magnetism was weak but present. The lab's conclusion: the coin had been struck on a leftover or experimental planchet not intended for Roosevelt dime production. Emily's find quickly drew the attention of collectors and researchers. She posted her results on a coin forum, attaching high-resolution images and lab documentation. The reactions were mixed at first. Some believed it to be a plated counterfeit. Others suspected tampering. But as more collectors examined her findings, consensus began to shift. The die marks, strike pressure, and wear patterns were all consistent with authentic mint production. No signs of external manipulation. And most importantly, she wasn't alone. Within weeks, 2 other examples were reported, both also from the Philadelphia Mint, both sharing similar metallurgical properties. Each showed minor strike irregularities, particularly on the reverse side. The torch's flame appeared faintly stretched, and the olive branch lacked its usual definition. Letters along the rim seemed slightly compressed. What's more, each of these coins responded faintly to magnetic tests and weighed in the range of 2.40 to 2.46 grams. A pattern was forming. Researchers began speculating about the origin of the planchets. Some pointed to experimental strikes intended for transit tokens or test runs for vending machine calibration. Others believed they were remnants of foreign coinage contracts repurposed, or mistakenly reintroduced, during routine mint maintenance. A few insiders quietly confirmed that in 2014, there had been a short run of planchets created for a prototype coin design, ultimately shelved before release. It was possible, they admitted, that a handful had remained in the system, eventually fed into dime presses by error. The idea was compelling. It offered an explanation for the anomaly, an error born not out of mechanical failure, but human oversight. A procedural slip that allowed the wrong material to cross paths with the right die. That intersection, brief and unnoticed at the time, had produced coins that now existed as rare hybrids, unintended yet undeniably real. Emily's coin, the first and most documented of the group, became the subject of numismatic fascination. Graded and slabbed by a major certification agency as an experimental alloy error, 2015 Roosevelt dime, it was given a Mint State 64 designation. Photos of the coin began circulating in collector magazines, sparking renewed interest in modern errors. The story was covered at length in numismatic blogs and local news outlets, not only because of its rarity but because of who found it, a high school teacher, applying scientific curiosity to something most people would overlook. Collectors began scrutinizing 2015 dimes with renewed vigor. Coin roll hunters posted their findings online, many weighing each coin and performing simple drop tests in search of duplicates. Over the following 2 years, a small handful of similar error dimes emerged, some with slightly different compositions, but all consistent in weight and magnetic pull. None, however, matched the detail and condition of Emily's original find. Auction houses took notice. In 2019, one of the lesser examples, exhibiting wear and edge damage, sold for $18,000. A cleaner specimen, though slightly underweight, brought in $24,500 at a numismatic expo in Florida. The buzz around 2015 dimes reached a new high when a certified high-grade error with a near-perfect reverse sold in early 2022 for over $40,000. But Emily's dime, the origin point of the discovery, remained in her possession. She received several private offers over the years, each increasing in value, but she held onto it, using it as a teaching tool for her students. She would later say that no textbook had ever created as much engagement in her classroom as that one unusual dime. Finally, in the summer of 2024, after nearly a decade of ownership, she chose to auction the coin. A portion of the proceeds, she stated, would fund her school's science department. The auction, held in Chicago, drew both veteran collectors and first-time bidders. The coin, well documented and still in pristine condition, fetched a remarkable $62,000, just shy of its projected upper estimate. Today, the 2015 Roosevelt dime error is recognized as one of the more elusive modern mint mistakes. Its combination of foreign alloy, subtle design distortion, and magnetic properties set it apart from other errors of the decade. Though fewer than a dozen examples have been verified, their value continues to rise steadily. Depending on condition, weight, and provenance, these rare dimes now command prices ranging from $28,000 to $65,000, with collectors eager to discover more hiding in plain sight: the quiet misstep of a night shift operator, the scientific curiosity of a classroom teacher, and the relentless scrutiny of the collector community came together to uncover a story most would have dismissed with a glance. But as with so many things in numismatics, the smallest inconsistencies often conceal the biggest stories. And in the case of the 2015 dime, that story still echoes through the silent shimmer of metal: mistaken, misplaced, and unforgettable.